The low hum of the Saturday afternoon crowd at the Italian bistro in Buckhead, Atlanta, died down instantly, strangled by the words that hung in the air like acrid smoke after an explosion. I froze, my fork hovering over my plate of chicken parmesan, feeling about 30 pairs of eyes swivel toward our table by the window, the specific one he had requested upon arrival. My name is Vesper, and in that moment, sitting across from the man I had shared 4 years of my life with, something inside me shifted with a silent, irrevocable finality. It wasn't a thunderous break, but the soft, definitive click of a lock finally engaging. Cash's expression was one I had seen before, but only fully recognized then. A mix of cold satisfaction and hungry anticipation, like a child waiting to see what happens after pulling the wings off a butterfly. His boys, Tariq, Omari, and Dante, watched from the next table with barely disguised glee, their presence no casual coincidence. He had orchestrated this, choreographed my public execution, and invited an audience. "Thank you for being honest," I said, my voice steadier than I imagined possible. His eyebrows shot up a fraction. That wasn't in his script. A strange, glacial calm began to spread through my veins, numbing the shock. I brought my left hand to the engagement ring, the same one he'd used to propose at his parents' anniversary dinner 2.5 years ago, also ensuring a crowd. I slid it off slowly, the platinum band cool against my skin, and tucked it into the inner pocket of my blazer. "You know what?" I continued, the idea blooming fully formed from some deep, untapped well of self-preservation. "I think I'm going to throw a great escape party." A stifled chuckle erupted from his friend's table, then a few others laughed. Cash's smile widened. He was enjoying this, thinking me delirious. But the laughter began to fade as they noticed the absence of tears, the lack of a raised voice, the missing scene he so clearly craved. Instead, I picked up my water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip, the condensation cool against my palm. "Vesper," he said, a new sharp edge to his tone. "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard you perfectly," I replied, meeting his gaze squarely. "You don't love me anymore. The wedding is off. I believe I already thanked you for your honesty." His jaw tightened, the carefully laid script crumbling before his witnesses. I pulled my wallet from my purse, left enough cash to cover my meal and a generous tip for the waitress who would have a story to tell, and stood. "I have to tell you, Cash, you picked an interesting stage for this announcement," I commented, gathering my things. "A packed restaurant on a Saturday afternoon, your boys conveniently here to witness it all. Very theatrical." His face grew taut, a mask of frustration replacing the smug satisfaction. "I thought you deserved the truth." "And I got it," I answered simply. "More truth than you perhaps intended to show." I glanced at his friends, who were now exchanging awkward, confused looks. "Gentlemen," I said, nodding, "thank you for being here today. Your presence has been very revealing." As I walked toward the exit, the weight of every gaze in the restaurant pressed on my back. But instead of shame, I felt a piercing, almost violent clarity. 4 years. I had given him 4 years, and in one meticulously orchestrated moment, he had shown me the core of who he was. Not in a fit of passion, but with cold, deliberate calculation. He had planned the public execution of our relationship the way one plans a gala. The crisp autumn air outside hit my face like a slap, and I took a deep, shuddering breath. My hands weren't shaking, my eyes were dry. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and only in the private silence of the vehicle did I let the reality settle. But it wasn't devastation that flooded me. It was a terrifying, liberating recognition. I had just seen Cash show his true face, and the person I saw was a stranger I never wanted to know. The drive home was a tunnel of fragmented memories, each one now viewed under a harsh, new light. I met Cash when I was 23, fresh out of college and wide-eyed. He was 25, a marketing executive dripping with confidence that felt like being seen. Our first date at a coffee shop near Piedmont Park, where he listened with rapt attention as I spoke of my dream to start my own event planning company. Now I realized he wasn't connecting, he was gathering intel. By the end of our first year, my life had subtly, inexorably begun to orbit his preferences. He didn't care for my college friends, so I saw them less. My apartment was too far from his office, so I moved. My entrepreneurial dreams were too risky, so I tucked my business plan into a drawer, labeling it someday. I told myself these were compromises, the necessary give and take of love, but the giving was always me. Defending him for my worried mother last Christmas, I'd used phrases that now tasted like ash. He's just stressed with work. You don't know him like I do. The engagement itself should have been a warning. He'd proposed at his parents' 40th anniversary dinner, down on one knee before 200 people, their phones held high. It was never about us. It was a performance. The wedding planning that followed was a slow erosion of myself, my desire for an intimate ceremony drowned out by his need for a 300-guest spectacle at a hotel that screamed status. My preferences dismissed as emotional whims against his logical necessities. "It's not just about you, Vesper," he'd say. "It's about our future. The people at the wedding are people we need for our careers." Our careers. He meant his. Parked in front of my building, I sat in the darkening car, the pieces clicking into a horrifying mosaic. The way he'd correct my pronunciation in public as a joke, the praise in front of others that turned to critique in private, the gifts with invisible strings, the control disguised as care. "Let me handle it. You don't need to worry about money." What that meant was, I decide. I had become so small, so focused on making it work, that I'd forgotten the shape of my own soul. My phone buzzed, a message from my best friend, Zuri. "How's lunch going?" I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. "Wedding is off. Explain later, but I'm good. Actually, I'm better than good." Her reply was instant. "What? I'm coming over tonight." As I put the phone down, I looked once more toward the distant glow of the restaurant. He was probably there still, at our table, explaining my calm as shock, assuring his friends I hadn't processed it yet. He had no idea. He had handed me the key to a cage I hadn't even fully acknowledged was locked. That night, Zuri arrived with 2 bottles of wine and a fierce protectiveness in her eyes. "Tell me everything," she demanded, dropping onto my sofa. I did, sparing no detail about the requested table, the invited audience, the palpable sense of a staged event. Her expression shifted from worry to a grim vindication. "I knew it," she whispered. "I've watched you change over these 4 years." The woman who'd argue with professors started asking for permission to grab coffee. I wanted to say something 100 times. "Why didn't you?" I asked, my voice thin. "Because you weren't ready to hear it," she said softly, "and because I knew if I pushed, he'd use it to isolate you even more. I was waiting for you to see it yourself." Her words were a balm and a burden. She'd been a silent sentinel, guarding a friendship I'd been ready to sacrifice on the altar of Cash's approval. "The thing that bothers me the most," I admitted, the truth cold and sharp, "is that he planned it. He wanted to humiliate me, to break me in front of everyone." Zuri nodded, her eyes hard. "He wanted witnesses to your breakdown so he could prove his narrative. But you didn't break, and I bet that's driving him crazy right now." As if summoned, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another message from Cash. "I think you're in shock. This isn't you. Call me when you're ready for a real conversation." Zuri let out a humorless laugh. Men like him expect a script. Tears, pleading. When they don't get it, they unravel. We talked for hours, and with each revelation, the hazy picture sharpened into something more sinister. "His friends were laughing at first," I told her. "When I mentioned the great escape party, they thought I was delirious. They stopped when I didn't crumble. So, this party, Zuri asked, pouring more wine, are you actually going to throw it? The idea, born as a reflexive shield, now felt like a necessary declaration of war. I think so, I said. Not to mock him, but to reclaim the narrative before he rewrites it. He's going to tell everyone his version, that he's the hero leaving an unstable woman. If I throw a party celebrating my escape, if I frame this as a liberation, I take that power back. Zuri's eyes sparkled with fierce approval. It's brilliant. You're not the jilted fiancé. You're the woman who dodged a bullet. But a darker thought surfaced. There's something else, I added, the memory crystal clear. Tariq was recording with his phone. I saw it when I stood up. Zuri's expression hardened into something deadly. He wanted video. This wasn't just a public breakup, it was a production. He wanted evidence of your humiliation, something to solidify his story. The chilling truth of it settled in the room. Cash hadn't staged the spectacle just to leave. He was building a case. My reaction, my calm, wasn't good content. It ruined his narrative. I need to understand why, I said, my voice low. Not to change anything, but to know what I'm really dealing with. Zuri squeezed my hand. Whatever you find, I'm here. And for what it's worth, the woman I saw today is the one I've been waiting for years to see again. The following days were a study in his escalating confusion. His messages transitioned from condescending concern to irritated demands. This silence is childish. Call me. People are asking me what happened. You have to help me explain this. I heard you're telling people you're having a party. What is that? Are you trying to humiliate me? I didn't answer a single one. The silence was my newfound armor. Meanwhile, I began the practical work of dissolution. The wedding was 7 months out, but deposits for the venue, catering, photographer, and florist were in my name, a detail I'd once seen as logistical, now understood as strategic for him. My first call was to the venue coordinator, Mrs. Elta. The deposit is non-refundable, honey, she said sympathetically, but I can offer a credit for any future event. Actually, I replied, the plan solidifying, maybe I could use the space sooner. Do you have any dates next month? She was surprised but intrigued. What kind of event? A celebration, I said, the words feeling potent on my tongue, of new beginnings. Every vendor was understanding, some even relieved. Roosevelt, the florist, waived his labor fee. Vesper, he'd confided, every time you came in, you were tense, apologizing. You looked like you were trying to please someone who couldn't be pleased. That's not how this should feel. His confirmation was another brick in the wall of my resolve. By Wednesday, I had a date. 3 Saturdays away, in the very hall meant for my wedding reception. The great escape party was no longer a metaphor, it was a mission. Building the guest list led me into the digital heart of his deception. In our shared wedding documents, I found a separate list I'd never created. Priority notifications. About 40 names. His friends, colleagues, relatives. Next to each was a note, "Update wedding. Send immediately." The version history showed he'd created it 2 weeks before the restaurant scundown. He'd been planning this for at least 14 days. Deeper in the cloud, I found the draft message. As some of you witnessed today, I made the difficult decision to end my engagement to Vesper, someone who doesn't share my values. It painted him as the sensible victim. Then, in his sent folder, the damning evidence. Messages from that morning. Today is the day. Meet me at the bistro at 1:35. I want you guys there to see. And Tariq's reply, finally, been waiting for this. I'm going to record everything. They were accomplices. And then the knife to the heart. A message to Sienna, sent the night before. Tomorrow, I end it with Vesper. I know you've been patient. I can't wait to be free and start our new chapter. Sienna. The name was a ghost, a shadow figure in my own life. I felt a nausea that had nothing to do with food. It wasn't just a planned breakup, it was a full-scale transition with a replacement already waiting in the wings. The call logs, which I scoured with a detached horror, showed communication stretching back 5 months. This was no fleeting affair. It was a parallel relationship he'd cultivated while I chose napkin colors. The why of the public spectacle became sickeningly clear when Zuri called, her voice taut. A coworker is friends with Tariq's girlfriend. Cash has been telling his circle for months that you're emotionally unstable, clingy, that he's scared of you. He said he needed witnesses because he was afraid of how you'd react in private. The pieces snapped together with an audible crack. The public breakup was a defensive strike. He wanted video evidence of a meltdown to validate his lies, to prove to everyone, including himself perhaps, that he was the noble escapee from a toxic partner. My calm defiance had thrown a wrench in his entire machinery of manipulation. He wasn't just confused, he was exposed. I opened my laptop, my hands steady now, and began to compile everything. The timeline with Sienna, the planning messages, the call logs, the drafted narrative. I wouldn't weaponize it publicly, that would play into his unstable caricature, but I would know, and if the truth found its way to those who needed to see it, so be it. The invitations went out. Simple, elegant, speaking only of celebrating a new beginning. The ripple effect was immediate. Curiosity buzzed through our overlapping social circles. People Cash had warned not to attend became doubly intrigued. Then came the call from his younger sister, Amara. "Vesper," she said cautiously, "I don't know everything, but I want you to know I never believed what he said about you. I saw you at family gatherings for 4 years. You were accommodating, almost to the point where it was uncomfortable. I wondered why you never pushed back." Her words were a crack in his fortress, a sign that his own family was questioning the story. The battle for the narrative had begun. The night of the party, the hall was transformed. No white roses or ivory linens. Instead, deep oranges, rich purples, gold accents, sunflowers and wildflowers. String lights glowed overhead. It was vibrant, alive, utterly me. As guests arrived, true friends from college like Imani, who flew in from LA, family I'd neglected, coworkers, the room filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. The energy was one of reclamation. But beneath the music and laughter, a current of tension thrummed. Everyone knew why we were here. The questions came, as I knew they would. I answered calmly, showing a few discreet screenshots to those who asked, letting the facts speak. The planned humiliation, the recording, Sienna. I watched as understanding and revulsion dawned on their faces. The turning point was Nia, Dante's wife, who had been at the bistro. She approached me, her face pale with remorse. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling. "Dante painted it as helping a friend out of something toxic. I didn't know about the recording. I didn't know about her. I was part of something cruel. The way you stood tall that day, that's not how someone unstable reacts." Her public shift was a seismic event in our small world. Then, near 10 o'clock, he appeared. I saw him first, a storm cloud in the entrance, scanning the room with fury. He wore a shirt I'd bought him, a detail that felt like a territorial claim. Conversations stuttered and died as he strode toward me. "Vesper," he spat, voice tight. "Can I ask what you think you're doing?" I turned, my serenity a wall against his rage. "I'm throwing a party, Cash. You aren't invited." "You're trying to destroy me," he hissed, low enough for only our immediate circle to hear. "Telling everyone lies." I haven't said anything that isn't true, and everything I've shown came from our shared files, files you created. A flash of panic in his eyes, quickly masked by anger. "You went through my things." "Our things," I corrected. "The same things you never bothered to secure because you assumed I'd be too broken to look." He looked around, seeking an ally, finding only closed, assessing faces. Imani had her phone out, recording. Nia stared, unblinking. "This is crazy," he said louder now, a desperate gambit. "You're crazy. This is exactly what I told everyone." "Cash," I interrupted, my tone final. "Look around. Look at the people who knew me before you. Do they see me that way?" His gaze swept the room, meeting a unified front of disappointment and disdain. The audience he'd once commanded was now mine. "You planned to humiliate me," I stated, each word a hammer blow. "You had your friends recorded. You had messages ready. You had another woman for months. It's all documented. All true." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The narrative had fully, publicly, and irrevocably slipped from his grasp. With a final, searing glance, he turned and walked out, his exit more deafening than any entrance. The party continued, but the air had cleared. The truth was out, not screamed, but stated. It was over. In the weeks that followed, the aftershocks rolled through his life. Sienna left him. Tariq's girlfriend did the same. Professional doors closed. Nia filed for divorce. The figure he'd so carefully constructed lay in ruins. I, meanwhile, quit my job and launched my own event planning company. The business plan left in the drawer saw the light. Clients came. Life expanded. A year later, I heard through the grapevine he'd been laid off and moved cities, a ghost fleeing his own consequences. Sitting in my own office, the autumn sun streaming in, I realized the great escape was not from him, but from the smaller, dimmer version of myself I'd agreed to become. The party was never about revenge. It was a declaration, a reclaiming. He had designed that Saturday lunch as my end. Instead, with a thank you and a steady gaze, I had turned his execution into my emancipation. And in the silent, powerful aftermath, I finally understood. The greatest escape is into the full, unapologetic ownership of your own life. The dust from the great escape party settled, but the silence that followed was not the quiet of an ending, but the potent, humming stillness of a beginning. I threw myself into building my event planning company, Vesper Visions, with a ferocity that surprised even me. The first few months were a blur of late nights, business plans, and the terrifying thrill of chasing my own dream, not someone else's. Clients came. First through word of mouth from friends at the party, then through genuine referrals. I designed a wedding for a couple who wanted nothing traditional, just a celebration that screamed them. It was featured in a local magazine. I organized a corporate retreat that was actually fun. The business grew, a tangible testament to a self I was rediscovering. Yet, in the quiet moments, driving between venues, late at night after finishing a proposal, a low-grade hum of vigilance remained. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the knowledge that a man like Cash did not accept defeat. His entire identity had been built on control and curation. Public humiliation, especially of his own making, was a wound that would fester, not heal. Zuri and I discussed it over weekly dinners. "He's gone, Vesper," she'd say, trying to convince herself as much as me. "He's in Charlotte. He's someone else's problem now." But I'd seen the rage in his eyes as he left the party, a pure, unadulterated fury that had nothing to do with lost love and everything about shattered ego. That kind of anger didn't pack up and move. It waited. The first sign that my vigilance wasn't paranoia arrived 6 months after the party. It was subtle. My business Instagram account, which had been steadily gaining followers, suddenly received a wave of negative comments on a post showcasing a recent garden wedding. The comments were oddly specific. "Overpriced for mediocre taste. Heard the bride was miserable. This planner is known for being difficult to work with." They came from newly created, faceless accounts. I deleted them, blocked the users, and tried to dismiss it as random internet bile. Then, a potential client, a bride named Chloe, canceled our consultation at the last minute. When I followed up politely, she responded with a terse email.
After hearing some concerning reviews about your professionalism and stability, we've decided to go a different direction. The word stability was a cold knife to the gut. It was his word.
I called Zuri, my voice tight. It's starting. What is? She asked, then understood. No. You think it's him? Who else would use the word stability? It's from his playbook. He's trying to poison the well, but from a distance. We need proof, Zuri stated, her lawyerly mind kicking in. Proof was elusive. The fake accounts led nowhere. The disappointed client wouldn't reveal her source. It was smoke, no fire. I doubled down on my work, letting the quality of my events speak for itself, but the attacks grew bolder. A 1-star review popped up on a local wedding vendor site from an account named Truth Teller ATL. It was a lengthy, vicious paragraph alleging I'd stolen deposit money from a couple and had a public, documented emotional breakdown that made me unfit to handle stressful events. The review mentioned the bistro by name. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just smearing. This was a direct, pointed reference to his narrative. I had the review taken down by reporting it as defamatory, but the damage was done. A few more consultations went silent. The unease was a constant companion. Then, the phone call. It was a blocked number. Vesper Visions, I answered, professional and bright. There was a long pause, then a voice, artificially low and distorted by what sounded like a cheap voice modulator, but the cadence was hauntingly familiar. The past isn't finished with you, Vesper. Click. I sat frozen at my desk, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone a mocking buzz. It was him. It had to be. The theatricality, the menace, the use of my full business name, it was all his style. I felt the old, familiar clutch of anxiety in my chest, but this time it was met by a surge of cold anger. He wasn't going to terrorize me from the shadows. I went to the police. The officer, sympathetic but pragmatic, took my statement. Without a number, a clear threat, or proof it's him, there's not much we can do, he said. We can file a report for harassment, but it's a paper trail for now. Be vigilant. Change your routines. It was the official version of what I already knew. I installed a security system in my apartment and my new small office. I was careful about my roots home. The sense of freedom I'd fought so hard for began to feel conditional, bracketed by locks and alarm codes. The escalation happened on a rainy Tuesday. I was the last to leave the office, finalizing details for a large charity gala, my biggest contract yet. As I gathered my things, I noticed it. A single, perfect, white rose lying on the windshield of my car in the underground parking garage. It was sleek, thornless, chilling in its purity. Tucked under the wiper was a plain white card. On it, typed in a generic font, was a line from a poem I recognized, one Cash had read to me early on, pretending to be deeper than he was. And so we met. And so we grieve, for what is dead we can't retrieve. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise, a declaration that the past was alive and watching. I didn't touch it. I called the security for the building and waited in the locked lobby, shaking not from fear, but from a rage so profound it felt clean. This was no longer about reputation or business. This was a stalker's game. The security footage, when reviewed, showed a figure in a dark hoodie and baseball cap, face obscured, placing the rose and card. The person knew the camera blind spots. Professional, careful. You have to leave town for a bit, Zuri insisted that night, her face pale with worry. Go stay with your mom in Chicago until this blows over. And let him win? I shot back, the anger sharp. Let him scare me out of the life I built? No, that's exactly what he wants. He wants me to run, to hide, to prove I'm the unstable one he can control. Then what, Vesper? He's escalating. A rose today? What tomorrow? I fight back, I said, the plan forming as I spoke.
but not by hiding, by drawing him out. My strategy was twofold. Publicly, I became more visible than ever. I gave a small interview to the local paper about women entrepreneurs, mentioning my great escape from a stifling past in vague, empowering terms. I posted relentlessly about my work, showcasing success and joy. I was a fortress of normalcy and achievement. Privately, I began my own investigation. I hired a discreet, expensive private investigator named Silas, a former detective with a no-nonsense demeanor. I gave him everything: Cash's full name, his last known employer, the details of the harassment. I said, "He's in Charlotte, supposedly, but I think he's here or close." Silas nodded, his eyes keen. People like this often can't stay away. The obsession keeps them orbiting. Let's see what we can find. While Silas worked, the charity gala approached. It was to be held at the Georgia Aquarium, a breathtaking event with donors and city influencers. It was the pinnacle of my comeback, and I knew, with a sick certainty, that Cash would see it as the perfect stage for his next act. The night of the event, the atmosphere was electric. The ballroom, surrounded by the ethereal blue glow of massive aquariums, shimmered. Everything was flawless. Yet, my senses were on high alert, scanning the crowd of 300 for a familiar face, a hostile gaze. Midway through the keynote speech, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. I turned subtly, my eyes sweeping the service entrance near the kitchen. A man in catering staff black and whites was standing too still, watching the room, not working. His build was right, the way he held his head. Before I could move, he melted back into the shadows. Heart hammering, I texted Silas, who was posing as security nearby. Possible sighting, service entry, west wall. I forced myself to circulate, to smile, to be the composed hostess. As I complimented the mayor's wife on her dress, a commotion erupted near the silent auction table. A server had tripped, sending a tower of champagne glasses cascading to the floor in a spectacular, shattering crash. The music hiccuped, all eyes swung toward the noise, and in that moment of diverted attention, I saw him, not in staff clothes, but in a sleek, dark suit, standing near the exit to the Ocean Voyager tunnel. Cash. He looked right at me, a faint, cold smile on his lips, and then he was gone, slipping into the dark tunnel, surrounded by the silent, gliding forms of whale sharks. I didn't hesitate. I whispered an excuse to the group I was with and moved, not running, but walking with swift, determined purpose. I entered the tunnel. The world fell into a deep blue silence, punctuated only by the muffled sounds of the gala behind me and the immense, graceful shatters drifting overhead. The pathway was dimly lit, deserted. My heels clicked on the concrete. "You knew I'd come," his voice echoed from ahead. He stepped out from an alcove, blocking the path forward. He looked older, harder, the charming veneer completely stripped away, leaving only cold intensity. "You're not supposed to be here, Cash," I said, my voice steady, echoing in the aquatic chamber.
"You threw a party to celebrate leaving me," he said, taking a step closer. The blue light made his face look gaunt, sinister. "You turned everyone against me, my friends, my family, my job. You think you just get to walk away and build a shiny new life on the ruins of mine?" "You built those ruins yourself," I replied, holding my ground. "I just refuse to live in them." His smile was a grimace. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. That little stunt at your party, you think you won? This was never about you, Vesper. It's about order. It's about consequence. You don't get to consequence me." His logic was twisted, narcissistic, and utterly predictable. He was here to restore his order, to punish me for my defiance. "The police have a file on you," I said. "Silas has followed you for weeks. We know you never really moved. We know about the fake reviews, the phone call." I was bluffing slightly, but his eyes flickered.
You're not a ghost, Cash. You're just a man making a pathetic scene again. Rage contorted his features. You always did talk too much. He lunged, not for me, but for the small clutch in my hand, the one containing my phone, my master schedule for the night. It was a bizarre, aggressive move. I jerked back, but he grabbed my wrist, his grip vice-like. Let go, I snarled, my composure shattering. The struggle was silent and brutal in the eerie blue light. A whale shark passed overhead, a vast, indifferent god. I kicked out, connecting with his shin. He grunted, his grip loosening for a second, and I wrenched free, stumbling back. But he still had my clutch. He held it up, a trophy. You see? He panted. This is what you are. This is what you cause. It was then that Silas and two aquarium security guards rounded the corner, their footsteps rapid. Cash's head whipped toward them. For a second, pure panicked calculation flashed in his eyes. Then, with a last venomous look at me, he turned and sprinted down the tunnel, disappearing into the darkness toward the other exit. Are you hurt? Silas asked, reaching me. No, I breathed, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. He has my phone. We'll get it. We have him on camera now, unequivocally. Harassment, trespassing, assault. That's enough. He spoke into his radio, coordinating with the real security. The gala continued, blissfully unaware of the drama in the deep. I smoothed my dress, fixed my hair, and walked back into the light and the noise, a perfect mask over the turmoil. The event was a triumph. The next morning, it was all over the society pages. But for me, the real headline was the police report filed that night. With the aquarium security footage, my statement, and Silas's documentation of the preceding harassment, they had enough to issue a warrant. They found him 2 days later, holed up in a short-term rental in Decatur, not Charlotte. My phone was there, wiped clean. He was arrested for stalking, aggravated assault, and trespassing. He posted bail almost immediately, but the gears of justice were finally turning. The arrest was a seismic event. The last holdouts in his circle severed ties. His new employer in Charlotte, notified, placed him on indefinite leave. The relief was profound, but it wasn't over. The legal process was slow. His lawyer argued it was a lover's quarrel gone wrong, that I was an ex-fiancé trying to destroy him. My credibility, my stability, was put on trial. I had to sit in a sterile deposition room and recount every moment of the restaurant breakup, the party, the rose, the tunnel, while his lawyer tried to paint my calm as calculation, my success as vengeance. It was another kind of violation. But I had evidence, I had witnesses, I had the truth. The day before the preliminary hearing, I received a package at my office, no return address. Inside was a small velvet box. With a sinking heart, I opened it. There, on a bed of black silk, was my engagement ring. No note. It was the ultimate mixed message, a symbol of a promise returned, but also a claim. I still have this part of you. I can still reach you. It felt less like a peace offering and more like a landmine. I handed it over to my lawyer, another piece of evidence. The hearing was a grim affair. Cash sat at the defendant's table, polished and contrite, the picture of a misguided man. He pleaded not guilty, of course, but the judge, after reviewing the evidence, the timeline of harassment, the aquarium footage, which was undeniably menacing, upheld the charges and issued a strict, expanded restraining order. Cash was forbidden from contacting me or coming within 500 yards of my home, my office, or any known event I was coordinating. It was a legal wall. I left the courthouse feeling hollow. It was a victory, but a costly one, fought in trenches of anxiety and dread. Zuri hugged me tight. It's over, she murmured. Is it? I asked, watching his retreating back as he was led out a different door. He doesn't know how to stop. The law will make him, she said, with more conviction than I felt. For a few months, there was quiet. I focused on my business, which flourished despite, or perhaps because of, the notoriety. I started dating cautiously, a kind, funny architect named Leo who knew my story and thought I was the bravest person he'd ever met. Life began to feel sweet again, not just defiant. Then, on the anniversary of the Great Escape Party, an envelope arrived at my apartment building, slipped under the main door with no postmark. Inside was a printed photograph. It was a picture of me and Leo taken 2 nights earlier, laughing outside a restaurant. The angle was from across the street, telephoto lens. On the back, in handwriting I knew too well, was a single word: always. The fear returned, cold and final. The restraining order was just paper. He was still here, watching, waiting. He would always be in the shadows. I showed it to Silas and my lawyer. The police were called again, but without a direct threat or a clear citing, their hands were tied. "He's baiting you," Silas said, "trying to provoke a reaction, to get you to violate the order by confronting him. Don't take the bait." But I was done being prey. I was done having my life dictated by his obsession. I decided to take the ultimate risk, to use the one thing he couldn't resist, a public stage, as a trap. I would host an event so high profile, so undeniably mine, that his need to disrupt it, to insert himself back into my narrative, would be irresistible. And this time, I would be ready. The event was a launch gala for a major new arts foundation to be held at the High Museum of Art. It was my most prestigious contract yet. I poured everything into it, but I also worked with Silas on a separate clandestine layer of security. Every staff member was vetted. Additional plainclothes security were hired, briefed with Cash's photo. Motion sensors were placed in non-public areas. The entire venue was to be a visible celebration with an invisible net.
The night of the gala, the museum was transformed. Contemporary art installations glittered under clever lighting. The city's elite mingled under the soaring atrium ceiling. I wore a crimson dress, a color of warning and strength. I was a visible, calm center in the whirl, but every sense was tuned to a razor's edge. I knew he would come. His pathology demanded it. He made his move during the pianist's performance. A fire alarm blared, sudden and deafening. The crowd murmured in confusion. It was a classic diversion. As people began to shuffle toward exits, I didn't move. I looked toward the modern sculpture garden, a quieter wing off the main hall. Silas's voice crackled in my discreet earpiece. Alarm triggered in service hallway. He's inside, moving toward the Rodin court. I moved against the current of the crowd, slipping through a staff door and into the labyrinthine back halls of the museum. The Rodin court was a circular, sky-lit room, housing the Shade, a powerful, tormented bronze figure. I entered the empty, echoing space. He was there, standing in the center, facing the sculpture as if admiring it. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Cash," I said, my voice ringing in the marble chamber. He turned slowly. He looked gaunt, unkempt, the suit rumpled. The polished facade was utterly gone, revealing the raw, desperate obsession beneath. "You knew I'd be here." "I counted on it. The alarm was a cheap trick. You're getting sloppy." "This ends tonight, Vesper," he said, his voice hollow. "One way or another. It ended a year ago. You just refused to accept it. You're not in my story anymore." "I am your story," he shouted, the sound bouncing off the walls. "Everything you are now is because of me, because I made you strong by breaking you." His delusion was complete. He saw himself as the author of my life. "You didn't make me anything," I said, taking a step closer, my fear gone, replaced by a vast, clear pity. "You were just the lock I had to pick to get free." He lunged then, not with a plan, but with pure, frantic rage. But this time, I was not alone. Silas and 2 other men emerged silently from the archways. Cash was grabbed, subdued quickly, his cries of protest swallowed by the vast room. As they handcuffed him, he stared at me, his eyes burning with a hatred so intense it seemed to warp the air between us. "I'll always be here," he spat. "You'll always be looking over your shoulder." I walked up to him, stopping just outside his reach. I looked at the man who had tried to own me, to break me, to define me. I saw only a small, trapped, pathetic creature. "No," I said, my voice quiet and final. Because after tonight, I won't be looking for you at all. You're just noise, and I've learned how to tune you out. They led him away. This time, the charges would stick: violation of a restraining order, trespassing, felony stalking, attempted assault. He would face real time. I walked back to the gala. The fire alarm had been silenced, the music had restarted, the party was back in full swing. No one knew what had happened in the silent room with the bronze figures. I smoothed my crimson dress, took a glass of champagne from a passing tray, and joined a group of laughing donors. The great escape was finally, completely over. I had not just left the cage behind, I had dismantled it, piece by twisted piece, and walked away without a single glance back. The future ahead was wide open, bright, and entirely, unquestionably, my own. The conviction of Cash brought a closure that was legal but not yet cellular. The judge, swayed by the mountain of evidence, the timeline of harassment, the aquarium footage, the museum stunt, and the chilling, collected testimony of Silas and the security teams, handed down a sentence of 3 to 5 years. As he was led away in handcuffs, he did not look back at me. His posture was one of defeated arrogance, as if he were a political prisoner marched off by an unjust regime. The gallery was sparse. His family, what remained of it that still spoke to him, did not attend. The only sound was the dry, official click of the door closing behind him. I exhaled a breath I felt I'd been holding for 2 years. In the weeks that followed, a profound and unfamiliar quiet descended. The constant low-grade vigilance that had been my background hum for so long simply stopped. I'd catch myself double-checking locks or scanning a room when entering, only to realize the habit was now a ghost. Leo, patient and solid, celebrated with me quietly. "It's over, Vesper, really over," he'd say, holding me, and I'd nod, burying my face in his shoulder, wanting desperately to believe the words had soaked into my bones. Life expanded in the vacuum left by the fear. Vesper Visions thrived. I won a prestigious award for the Arts Foundation Gala, the one that had been the trap. The irony was not lost on me. My greatest professional triumph was inextricably linked to my deepest personal terror. I accepted the award with a speech about resilience and the art of crafting beautiful spaces, never mentioning the ugliness that had lurked in the wings. Business boomed. I hired 2 assistants and leased a brighter, airier office with a view of the park. I reconnected with old friends, traveled with Leo, and slowly, the memories of Cash began to feel like a story I'd read about someone else, dramatic but distant. But trauma, I was learning, is not a linear narrative. It doesn't end with a verdict. It retreats, hibernates, and surfaces in dreams. I'd wake gasping from nightmares not of confrontation, but of suffocation, of being slowly wrapped in invisible gauze, my voice silenced. I'd feel a jolt of irrational panic if a client was overly controlling, or if a man in a suit stood too still in a crowd. Leo called them echoes, and he was right. They were the aftershocks of a quake that had reshaped my interior landscape. 6 months after the sentencing, on a perfect spring afternoon, I was meeting a bride and her mother at a sun-drenched vineyard in North Georgia. The consultation was going beautifully. The bride, Maya, was creative and warm, her vision aligning perfectly with my aesthetic. As we walked through the rows of budding vines, discussing ceremony placements, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but with a 912 area code, Savannah. "Excuse me for just a moment," I said, stepping a few paces away. "Vesper Visions, this is Vesper." There was a crackle of static, then a voice, shaky and thin. "Miss Vesper, my name is Lydia Shaw." The name meant nothing. I was hoping you could help me, or that maybe we could help each other." I felt a prickle of professional caution. "I'm sorry, Lydia, I'm with a client right now. Could you email me the details of your event?" "It's not an event," she whispered. The words rushed. "It's about Cassius. Cash. I'm Sienna." The world tilted. The sun seemed too bright, the scent of earth suddenly cloying. Sienna. The ghost from the documents, the name in the scent folder, the shadow in the parallel life. I glanced back at Maya and her mother, who were admiring the view, oblivious. I have nothing to say to you, I said, my voice cold and automatic. Please, she begged, a sob catching in her throat. Please, just hear me out. He lied to me about everything, but mostly he lied about you. And now I think he's lied about other things, dangerous things. I'm scared. The raw terror in her voice was undeniable. It wasn't the performative fear Cash had tried to pin on me. This was the real tremulous thing. Where are you? I asked. Savannah, but I can't talk here. He had friends. Can I come to Atlanta just to talk, 1 hour? I knew it was a risk. This woman had been part of the machine that tried to break me. She was a stranger, potentially unstable, potentially a pawn in some new, elaborate game Cash was running from prison. But her fear seeped through the phone line, contagious and chilling. And a deeper, more insidious part of me needed to know, to look into the eyes of the woman he'd chosen as my replacement, to understand what part she played in the story. This Saturday, 10 a.m., the cafe in the Midtown Museum. It's public. You get 1 hour. I hung up before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly. I slipped the phone into my pocket, painted a serene smile on my face, and walked back to my clients, my mind racing 1,000 miles away. I told Leo and Zuri that night. Zuri was vehemently against it. Absolutely not, Vesper. This is a trap. She's his plant. He's orchestrating this from his cell. How? I argued. His communications are monitored. This woman sounded genuinely terrified. She's an actress. He's a narcissist. They always have flying monkeys. She's coming to finish what he started, to get close to you, to mess with your head. Leo was more measured, but concerned. What do you hope to gain from meeting her? The rest of the story, I admitted. I know my half. I know the restaurant, the planning, the harassment. But I don't know why her. What did he tell her? What did she believe? If she's in danger, if he was involved in something else, I need to know what I was really entangled with. Knowledge is the only thing that ever truly protected me. In the end, I went. I asked Silas to be at the cafe museum, posing as a patron reading a newspaper at a nearby table. I chose a seat with my back to a wall, facing the entrance. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately from a photo I'd once unearthed in a hidden social media album. She was prettier in person, but faded, like a photograph left in the sun. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, her eyes darting nervously. She wore a simple sundress and looked achingly young, younger than I had imagined. She spotted me and approached as if walking to her own execution. "Vesper," she said, her voice a thread. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me." "Sit," I said, not offering a smile. "You have 1 hour." The story she told over a single cold cup of coffee was a funhouse mirror version of my own. She'd met Cash at a conference in Charleston 8 months before the restaurant breakup. He'd been charming, attentive, and profoundly tragic. His story was that he was trapped in an engagement to a woman, me, who was violently unstable. He claimed I had bipolar disorder I refused to treat, that I'd threatened suicide if he left, that I'd vandalized his car. He showed her fake text messages, likely from a second phone, doctored emails. He painted himself as a martyr, staying out of duty while his heart belonged to her. He said you needed him to manage your life, your medications, everything, she whispered, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. He said he was waiting for the right moment, a public moment with witnesses to break it off safely, for your protection, so you couldn't twist the story, so people would see the truth. My stomach churned. It was so clever, so perfectly inverted. The public humiliation was reframed as a compassionate intervention. The witnesses were for my safety. He'd cast himself as the hero in both narratives, the long-suffering fiancé and the brave savior. He said after it was done, we could be together openly. He'd get you the help you needed, and we'd start fresh. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. After the restaurant, he was furious, livid. He said you'd somehow manipulated the scene, that your calm was a calculated act to make him look bad. That's when I first started doubting.
The woman he described would have been sobbing. You just left. It didn't fit. After the breakup, their relationship intensified briefly, but Cash became increasingly paranoid and controlling. He was obsessed with my campaign against him. He'd rant for hours about the party, about how I was turning everyone into liars. He insisted she cut off her friends, who were asking too many questions. He moved her to Savannah, where he'd secured a new start job, but he was constantly traveling back to Atlanta, he said, to handle the fallout. Then the arrest happened, she said, her voice dropping, and everything exploded. The news stories, they described you as the victim. They talked about the stalking, the harassment. They mentioned you as an unnamed woman. My family saw it, my friends. I felt like such a fool. She took a shivering breath. I broke it off, told him I never wanted to see him again. He was frightening. He said I was just like you, that I was betraying him, that I'd regret it. This was the familiar pattern, but then she leaned forward, her eyes wide with a fresh fear. That should have been the end, she said. But about 2 months ago, I started getting these packages. No return address, Savannah postmark. At first, it was just my things. A scarf I'd left at his old apartment, a book. Then it was pictures of me, coming out of my apartment building, getting coffee. They were recent. A cold knot tightened in my chest. Have you gone to the police? Yes, they said without a direct threat, it's harassment, but they can't prove who's sending them. They said it's likely him, but he's in prison, so... She trailed off. Then her next words were barely audible. But Vesper, I don't think he's working alone. That was the bombshell. The cafe noise seemed to recede. What do you mean? Before he was arrested, he'd sometimes meet with this guy, not Tariq or any of the ones from the restaurant, someone older, hard. Cash called him a fixer. He said this guy helped him with problematic situations at his old job, disgruntled employees, stuff like that. Once, when Cash was raging about me after the aquarium thing, he said if the legal way to shut me up didn't work, he knew another way. She looked at me, her gaze pleading for belief. This man, I think, is the one sending the packages. I think Cash hired him from the inside to watch me. And if he's watching me?
He could be watching me, I finished, the chill spreading to my limbs. The echoes weren't just in my mind. The shadow had a proxy. I'm so sorry. Sienna wept openly now, drawing a few glances from other tables. I didn't know. I believed him. I loved him. And now I'm trapped, and I dragged you back into it just by existing. I looked at this broken woman not as the enemy, but as another victim of the same poison. His method was the same: isolate, control, rewrite reality. He had just used different lies for different audiences. My anger toward her dissolved, replaced by a weary solidarity. We were both survivors of the same wreck. You didn't drag me anywhere, I said, my voice firmer. He did. We need to go back to the police. Together. Your story and mine, the packages, the fixer, it connects the dots. It proves a continuing pattern, a conspiracy. It might be enough to extend his sentence, to investigate this other man. Hope flickered in her damp eyes. You do that after what I... This isn't about you and me, I said, signaling for the check. This is about stopping him. For good. The meeting with the detectives was tense but productive. Sienna was fragile but credible. Her testimony about the fixer, whose name she vaguely remembered as Mitch or Mac, gave them a new thread to pull. My own file was reopened. They confirmed Cash's prison communications were monitored, but he was allowed non-legal visits and letters. It was possible he'd passed instructions to someone during a visit. For a few weeks, there was a flurry of activity. Silas, now officially hired again, worked in tandem with the police, using his contacts to try and identify the fixer. The sense of being watched returned, but it was different this time, shared. Sienna and I, in a bizarre twist of fate, became reluctant allies, checking in with each other daily via brief, coded texts.
Zuri, though still wary, helped me vet Sienna's story, her legal mind finding the consistencies convincing. The break came from an unexpected source, Amara, Cash's sister. She called me, her voice tight with distress. "Vesper, I need to tell you something. My mother, she's been visiting Cash, against my advice. She came back from last week's visit upset. She said he was talking crazy, kept going on about unfinished business and cleaning up loose ends. He mentioned a name, Mac, said Mac was a loyal friend who understood that some problems needed permanent solutions." Amara's crying now. "My mother thinks it's just prison bravado, but I'm terrified. Permanent solutions. Vesper, you have to be careful." Permanent solutions. The words hung in the air like a toxic vapor. This was no longer about reputation or harassment. This was about survival in the most literal sense. The police took Amara's statement gravely. The fixer now had a probable first name, Mac, and the intent had escalated from intimidation to something far darker. The pressure was a vice. I couldn't sleep. Every car that idled too long outside my building, every wrong number call, every delivery person I didn't recognize sent adrenaline coursing through me. Leo insisted I move in with him temporarily, his high-security condo feeling like a bunker. Sienna went to stay with a cousin in Birmingham. We were both in hiding, waiting for a shadow to take form. It was Silas who found him. Mac's full name was Malcolm Mac Dyer. He was ex-military, had a dishonorable discharge, and a thin but serious rap sheet for aggravated assault and suspected arson. He was a ghost for hire, and Silas's surveillance determined Mac was not in Savannah. He was in Atlanta. He'd been photographed twice in the past week, casing my new office building and sitting in a diner across from Leo's condo. The police now had enough for stalking charges and to bring him in for questioning, but they needed to catch him in the act or with explicit instructions from Cash to make a conspiracy charge stick. They set up surveillance on Mac, hoping he'd lead them to evidence or make a move they could intercept. The move came on the night of my next major event, a high-profile black-tie fundraiser at the Fox Theater. It was my most complex undertaking yet, a blend of vintage Hollywood glamour and modern technology. I knew it was a risk to proceed, but canceling felt too much like surrender. The police assured me they would have undercover officers in and out, watching Mac, who they were confident was planning to use the crowded, chaotic event as cover. The night was a symphony of controlled chaos. The historic theater was opulent, swarming with waitstaff, performers, and 500 guests. I was everywhere at once, my earpiece buzzing with updates from my team. A separate encrypted channel connected me to Detective Ruiz, who was overseeing the operation from an unmarked van nearby. "Subject is on foot, 2 blocks west, heading in your direction," Ruiz's calm voice stated in my ear. "We have eyes on him. Do not deviate from your planned routine." My planned routine was to be a visible, moving target. I circulated, a smile fixed on my face, my crimson gown a beacon. Every nerve was alive. During the silent auction climax, Ruiz's voice came again, tighter now. "He's entered the building, service entrance, east side. He's wearing staff catering black. Teams are moving to intercept. Vesper, proceed to your designated safe room. Now." The safe room was the Old Star's dressing room on the 2nd floor, chosen for its single, solid door and no windows. My heart hammered against my ribs. I whispered an excuse to the group I was with and began moving through the throng towards the grand staircase. The opulent hall seemed to stretch, the laughter and music warping into a dissonant roar. As I reached the bottom of the staircase, I saw him. Mac. He was across the lobby, carrying a tray of empty champagne flutes, his gaze scanning the crowd. His eyes locked on mine. They were flat, cold, devoid of the manic emotion that fueled Cash. This was pure, professional menace. He began moving towards me, not rushing, but with a terrifying purpose, weaving through guests. I didn't run. Running would cause panic, create the chaos he needed. I turned and started up the staircase, forcing myself to walk at a normal pace, my hand on the gilded banister. I could feel his footsteps behind me, closing the distance. The second-floor hallway was quieter, lit with sconces, leading back to the warren of dressing rooms. I heard his footsteps around the corner behind me. "Vesper, where are you?" Ruiz's voice was urgent in my ear. "Second floor, west hallway, he's on me," I breathed, my pace quickening. "Turn right at the end, safe room is third door. We're coming up the east stairs, 30 seconds." I reached the end of the hall, turned right, the safe room door was in sight. I fumbled in my small clutch for the old-fashioned key. My hands were slick. I could hear his footsteps turning the corner behind me. The key slid in, turned. I pushed the heavy door open, slipped inside, and turned to slam it shut. A black-clad arm shot through the closing gap. The door slammed against it, but didn't close. With brutal strength, it forced its way open. Max stood in the doorway, blocking my escape. He tossed the tray aside. It clattered on the floor. He wasn't holding a weapon, but his hands were enough. He was bigger, stronger, and his intent was in his dead eyes. "He just wants you to be quiet," Max said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Permanent-like." There was no time for terror, only action. The dressing room had once been a sanctuary for stars. Now it was a cage. My eyes darted around. A vanity, a heavy upholstered stool, a rack of vintage costumes. Ruiz had said 30 seconds. I had to last 30 seconds. "Cash can't pay you from prison," I said, backing away, my voice surprisingly steady. "He already did," Mac replied, taking a step in, closing the door softly behind him. The click of the latch was final. "And I always finish a job." He lunged. I grabbed the vanity stool, swinging it with all my strength. It connected with his shoulder, throwing him off balance for a second. He grunted, more in annoyance than pain, and swatted it aside. I scrambled backward, my heels catching on the rug, and fell against the costume rack. Sequined gowns tumbled around me. He was on me in an instant, one hand closing around my throat, the other clamping over my mouth. The smell of stale cigarettes and cheap soap filled my senses. I fought, clawing at his hands, kicking, but his grip was iron. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. My earpiece was dislodged, skittering across the floor. "This is it," a distant part of my mind thought. "After everything, it ends in a dusty room, silenced." Then the world exploded into noise and light. The door burst inward, splintering off its hinges. Shouted commands. "Police! Get down! Get down now!" The pressure on my throat vanished as Mac was ripped off me and slammed face first into the floor. I crumpled, gasping, drawing ragged, burning breaths into my lungs. Detective Ruiz was there, his knee in Mac's back, cuffing him. Other officers flooded the room. "Vesper, talk to me." Ruiz was at my side, his hand on my shoulder. "I'm okay," I choked out, my voice raw. In Mac's pocket, they found a silenced pistol and a syringe filled with a clear liquid, later identified as a lethal dose of fentanyl, the lethal solution. They also found a burner phone with a single saved number, a number linked to a prepaid account that had received a collect call from the state prison 2 days prior. This time, the closure was different. It wasn't just a verdict, it was a dismantling. Mac, facing attempted murder charges, quickly cut a deal. He gave a full statement implicating Cash in a murder-for-hire conspiracy. The recorded prison call, the payment trail from Cash's hidden account, managed by Mac before his arrest, and the physical evidence were overwhelming. Cash's sentence was extended by decades, effectively a life term for a man like him. He would never walk free again. The system finally saw the full, monstrous picture. In the months that followed, the quiet that returned was deeper, truer. The echoes faded, the nightmares stopped. Sienna, after testifying, moved across the country, changed her name, and started over. We didn't stay in touch, but I wished her well. We had shared a monster, and that was bond enough. One evening, a year later, I stood on the balcony of the new home I'd bought with Leo. We were hosting a small, casual gathering, true friends. No spectacle, just laughter and good food. Zuri was telling a hilarious story, her hands flying. Leo squeezed my hand. I looked out at the twilight settling over the Atlanta skyline, no longer scanning for threats, just appreciating the view. The great escape was complete. It hadn't been a single moment, not the restaurant, not the party, not the courtroom. It had been a long, arduous journey out of a maze built by someone else's madness. I had escaped the relationship, the narrative, the harassment, and finally, the lethal shadow he'd cast from behind bars. I had reclaimed not just my life, but my peace. And in the warm, unguarded light of my own home, surrounded by the people I loved, I finally understood what freedom truly felt like. It was the quiet, glorious certainty that the rest of the story was mine and mine alone to write.